Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this urgent Leader of the Council's Cabinet Member meeting on Tuesday, the 4th of October at 2:30. Okay, good. So we're here. I'll go through the agenda first, and apologies.
There are none.
Okay. Identification of urgent items to which call everyone was applied.
Item 5.
Any declarations of interest? Minutes of the previous meeting held on the 26th of August, which I've seen and read and can. Okay. Thank you. So we're just one item, but it's quite a long one. Urgent key decision. Department of Local Housing Communities capital grant option linked to devolution deal. But just to set a bit of scene for this, in negotiations with around the new devolution deal, there's been an offer to bid into some funding from the infrastructure and from the department, which is an underspend on their behalf, which is this that we need to bid into. The reason it's urgent, I think it has to be submitted by the 10th of October.
That's right, yeah.
Which is obviously prior to cabinet. We've had the okay from the chair to deal with it in this manner. So, yeah, if you just mind stating your name and your role, and then I'll be all about it. Thank you.
Yeah, it's James Joyce. I'm the Head of Housing Options and Homelessness for Derby Homes. In July 2022, the Department of Levelling offered a bidding opportunity, as you said, Chair, for the D2N2 authorities with housing-related capital projects. Derby Homes, on behalf of Derby City Council and of Nottingham City Council, have co-produced a bid to DLUHC for capital funding of up to 1.9 million. The development of private rented sector leasing scheme in Derby and the expansion of the existing private rented sector scheme in Nottingham. Private rented sector leasing schemes create additional housing solutions for families owed duties under the Homeless Reduction Act by allowing local authorities and partners to channel properties to households in the most need. And such schemes also support the government's requirements for the use of B&B accommodation for families to be minimised wherever possible. The scheme that we're looking at will enable Derby City Council and Nottingham City Council to lease up to 55 private rented sector properties from private landlords over an extended period of 5 years, which can then be let to homeless families currently who would otherwise be heading to B&B accommodation. Derby Homes, on behalf of City Council, has also produced a bid to DLUHC for capital funding of 1.122 million to part fund the development of 15 additional homes to be owned by Derby City Council and let at an affordable rent. These homes will also aim to respond to the current shortage of affordable housing and provide additional housing for the housing market. With historically low turnover of social housing we see at the moment in the city, the impact of not providing such additionality is translated into more placements into temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast accommodation, and those placed are having longer and longer wait time to find more suitable accommodation. The capital funding for the development of 15 additional homes is a 40% contribution towards the 2022-2023, 23-24 capital costs of the proposed scheme. The remaining 60% will be funded through the housing revenue account. And as you said earlier, Chair, the application for this needs to be in by the 10th of October.
Can I just ask on that, James? After that 2-year period, what will happen to the properties then?
They will look the capital funding.
Yeah.
Well, the capital funding is to build properties, an additional 15. But you're on about the 5-year leasing.
Yes.
So the 5-year leases of the private sector, would they just go back to being the private landlord would have ultimate use of them again? So we're looking at being able to secure, rather than having private rented landlords out there being unscrupulous in some senses with the cost of living crisis, we can subsidise that, and I can go on to that a bit further later.
But the whole idea is that we have an immediate need for such housing because of the levels of homelessness
We have,
and the cost of accommodating them elsewhere.
yeah, and I'll touch on the unlawfulness of us at the moment with the use of bed and breakfast as well. So the recommendation is to authorise the submission of a joint bid with Nottingham City Council to DLUC for up to 1.9 million of capital grant for the private rented sector leasing scheme, and to authorise the submission of a bid by Derby City Council to DLUC for 1.122 for the capital grant for the properties to be built. 2.2 is the normal sort of rules around when we're bidding for properties, when we're bidding for funding, and
the delegations.
all the delegations.
Consultation with the League for Housing.
That's correct.
And Councillor Webb, I think, is aware of all these.
It is, yeah.
Anyway.
So moving on down to approve the use of assured short-hold tenancies for the purpose of allocating to the newly leased properties in line with the requirements of the bids. And so that is something that can take place under Derby Homes. And additionally, to delegate to the Strategic Director of Communities and Places, in consultation with the Strategic Director of Corporate Resource, to submit any subsequent bid and to receive grant funding in respect of the business cases detailed in 4.15 of this document, which we'll touch on, which are some of the things that are for the zero carbon bidding that's for a later round. Reasons for the submission: to enable the council to continue to expand the availability of accommodation that can be used to discharge the council's duties under the Homeless Reduction Act 2017. The bid also seeks to increase the availability of accommodation for those in housing need. And in line with the council's financial procedure rules, cabinet approval is required prior to submitting a bid for external and/or accepting an external funding.
But the acceptance of it is delegated.
Private sector leasing. The bid requires the use of leases between Derby Homes and the private landlords. These leases must be for a minimum of 5-year duration. In turn, these lease properties will be let on assured short-hold tenancies with a minimum period of 6 months to those with an identifiable housing need under the Homeless Reduction Act 2017. The use of assured short-hold tenancies is permitted under the terms of Derby Homes tenancy policy and the council's tenancy strategy.
For the purpose of that, we need to be able to have the flexibility to keep the availability of properties available. So during that short-term lease period, we'll be working with the residents to find full-time.
Yeah, so currently at the moment, we use that method in our temporary accommodation stock, which is our own general stock, which limits then the availability of properties. So by having these additional ones, gives us that extra ability to work directly with the customer to find them a long-term solution to their housing issues. Private rented sector leasing schemes, both Nottingham and Derby, are currently breaching the statutory limit on the use of bed and breakfast accommodation for families due to the high volume of presentations and lack of suitable temporary and intermediate accommodation. Placements into B&B are always the last resort for us and are not suitable alternatives they're not suitable alternatives to temporary accommodation and move on. And placements that last over 6 weeks are actually in breach of the statutory limit of use. Both cities are working extremely hard with DLUC on our bed and breakfast elimination plans to try and eradicate this. Private sector leasing schemes create additional housing solutions for families owed duties under the Homeless Reduction Act. It provides properties otherwise unavailable to homeless families in an increasingly competitive market, and such schemes also support the government's requirements for the use of B&B accommodation for families to be minimised wherever possible. The scheme will enable us and Nottingham City Council to lease 55 private rented properties. And again, this will help to alleviate the overused bed and breakfast accommodation. Additionally, this will lead to a reduction in homeless families being accommodated in unsuitable accommodation, lacking facilities and amenities that are conducive to providing a stable environment from which to normalise their lives as far as possible. The use of bed and breakfast for a family is, like I say, our last resort. But at the moment it is one of our only options. Both Nottingham City Council and Derby City Council will use partner organisations, Framework Housing Association and Derby Homes respectively, to deliver the scheme. They will source and lease the properties and let them on assured short hold tenancies to homeless families. And approval has been obtained by the chair of the board of Derby Homes, the council's own Dalmo, to enter into leasing agreements with private sector landlords, subject to the grant award being passed over to Derby Homes. Approval has also been sought with the council's Section 151 officer and relevant cabinet portfolio leads. Private landlords have been approached. We are confident that we can have lease arrangements with landlords settled or in train by the end of the financial year, with letting commencing within the financial year quarter 1 to 2023-2024. Any questions on that at all, Chair?
No, it's obviously a timely help really in terms of trying to address the problem, which has been a long existing problem, and funding will help greatly with achieving that.
And it will give us that ability to extend leasing opportunities to a really good length of time of 5 years, which will allow us to do some very meaningful solutions. So the new build property bid. So this project listed below aims to respond to the shortage of affordable housing, providing additionality to the affordable housing market. Again, with the historical low turnover of social housing in the city, the impact of not providing additionality is translated into more placements into temporary accommodation and bed and breakfast accommodation, and those placed are waiting longer and longer for more suitable long-term accommodation. Outlined below are some of the schemes that have been identified that are either in process with the bill being created or are due to start. And as you can see, there are a few there: Berwick Avenue, Cumming Street, Chesapeake Road and Whittaker Street. And it tells you the units that we're going to be getting and the projected timescales of delivery.
These are plots that have been wanting development for some while. This will help us achieve Chesapeake in particular.
It will, Chair. And Berwick Avenue, as you can see, Berwick Avenue is well underway. So on-site date is October 21, and we're due to complete October 2022. But the funding that's coming through will help us offset that and allow us then to revitalise that HRA funding for further projects. So by obtaining this grant, it allows us to offset some of that.
Ongoing, they'll be able to manage by Derby Homes.
Yeah. There'll be the properties will predominantly be owned by the council and delivered by us through the Elmo.
And the right to buy on these premises?
We try to alleviate that, and so those that we think that might be susceptible to right to buy, quite rightly, as you pointed out, Chair, will be signed over to Derby Homes for us to be able to own that. It's the right to buy. Right to buy doesn't apply to any of Derby Homes' stock. So,
See the tables there.
yeah.
Obviously makes sense to justify and explain what's happening.
And then additionally to that, Chair, there's the other schemes that are available. So across the combined authority area, expressions of interest were submitted against the devolution capital bid budget of £18 million. These were appraised and 6 schemes were agreed by the leaders of the constituent authorities for business cases to be developed. The 6 schemes are identified in the table below, which is on the next page. 1G, 1A/B are the 2 housing ones that I've already spoke of. And the additional ones are subject to the business cases being submitted by other lead authorities. There may be opportunity to secure funding from these identified in the D2N2 schemes across the patch. So due to the need to spend in this year, it's proposed to delegate to the Strategic Director of Communities and Places in consultation with the Strategic Director of Corporate Resource to submit any subsequent bid and to receive grant funding in respect of the business cases detailed in 4.15, which is that paragraph there.
Yes, and the relevant one, most likely relevant for one is ours is 1E, isn't it, in relation to retrofitting of like some installation and roof power and things like that. The others are more specific, so in relation to humidity across the area. So the most likely one, in addition, that we'll be bidding into is one in relation to retrofitting us, because we've got schemes ongoing already.
Yep.
And the pressure in relation to spending the money in year. This would help to be able to extend or build on existing schemes, which I think is the plan, and that was the discussion we had as leaders when we were agreeing the 6 business cases that we've made up.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's some potential benefits for Derby in that as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
So overall, very timely funding, bonus, additional funding that's come out of the negotiations around the Mayor Combined Authority. And actually shows that the P2N2 area, the combined area, can work together to benefit the whole region rather than just local areas. So is there anything else you need to add?
No, I mean, I can go through some of the other reasons why it's, the other options, and it's very limited. We don't really have many options, as already pointed out. We're already in breach of use of bed and breakfast. We've already got temporary accommodation locked by no move
All
on.
the timescales involved or something in anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm content. Unless there's any other questions or observations. Anybody? Okay, from your end. Okay, so then we've got 3 recommendations to agree, which you've been through already. The principal debate, which is delegated approval in relation to the grant comes. Also to transfer of the Derby element to the result of private and sector leasing scheme, and then delegations in relation to the business cases that have been built. Okay. Can you read those? That concludes the meeting.